first of many budget meetings tonight. Yeah, our Director of Finance, aka Minister of Finance, is first of many. Now, as all of you know, this meeting is being taped by our friends of the ratepayers. Everything tonight is, we're just initial get-go. There's going to be no final decisions made tonight, as everyone knows. We may have discussions about hypothetical scenarios of if we did this, what would that do to a tax increase? I just want the the folks in the audience and the public to know that at this point the discussion is hypothetical, and we're going to have to look at the big picture, obviously with all the elements in the budget included, and obviously then we can make final decisions. But right now it's a lot of hypothetical. We're fortunate to have with us Dale and Linda from our finance department, and as our official Minister of Finance, you're leading the charge tonight, and you're the boss here, so you have some ideas, and you've had departmental submissions.
Yes. So, thank you, Your Worship. What I've got in front of you is as you well know, it's preliminary. We have gotten together with management and staff and put some pretty good numbers in here from what, as I go through, you'll see what I mean by that. So it's something I'll kind of touch on as we get there. What I've got laid out for you tonight is being here just a short period of time. I understood that you liked the layout of the first section for the general fund, the water fund, the sewer fund. So I've kept that where it's more detailed. The other section where I've titled it budget summary is something that I've been used to, and what it does is it summarizes things a little bit more condensed into the actual area that they relate to. And also, for example, in this first section, for example, I'll use debt interest or debt principal. It's kind of, they're scattered around, so you don't see an actual group total in the first section, whereas I've created this other one where you're going to actually see it. And then it also flows through, and I'll talk about it in detail as I get there. What I was hoping to do tonight, and if council's in agreement, is that I'll discuss kind of from top to bottom, and then kind of leave the more discussion on particular items till the end, if they involve more discussion. If it's a quick comment or something, feel free, quick answer type thing. I just, in terms of getting the flow going on this, I found that always works better. We have provided you in the binder with some blank pages with lines for taking notes. So feel free to jot down any questions that you have, and I'll hopefully be able to answer them tonight. If I don't have the information right at hand, then I'll certainly get it for you. So having said all that, we'll start off on the first section there in the binder. It's the general fund. And so we'll just go page by page. And what I've done differently than what you might have seen last year was you just saw one total number for the municipal levy. I've taken it a step further and broken it down to the actual classes that we have. Because I always like to see what classes contributing to what in the municipal levy. I've also done that, you'll see later on too, with the RCMP property tax. And for the 1%, you see there the municipal infrastructure levy. The tax revenue I've done in this prelim budget is pretty much the same as last year's. And again, that section will obviously get discussed more as we move through the process. So we don't even have the final assessments, of course, till April. So I don't usually do too much with that till near the end when we've got more decisions on everything else in the budget. Other items on that page, the levy is the 1% of taxation to go towards future infrastructure. The parcel taxes and the franchise fees are pretty much set. Page 2, and I'll just touch on items that are of significance or that have changed from prior years in any significant amount. Small community protection grant, 488,000 is an actual figure I got from the ministry. It's down from, I think, 517 from last year, but it's due to go back up into that neighborhood next year. I can't answer how they do their funding formula, but I do have a set amount for it. The gas tax number in there is just what we receive in the current year, so that number can change depending on what projects we end up possibly doing with it. That will go hand in hand with our discussions on capital expenditures, and again, we're not talking about those tonight. We're just strictly on the operating side because as management we haven't quite got through all our discussions to bring you. But what you do see in the binder is kind of all the wish lists, but we have to pare it down before we bring the next draft to you. Because right now we wouldn't be able to balance the budget, quite honestly. The next numbers there are all items that we'll deal with once we get the requisitions from the other agencies, so there's no effect on the bottom line of the budget. Page 3. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Everything's fairly consistent with prior years. Page 4. Again, smaller numbers, no big change from prior years. The police tax revenue is, property tax rather, as I mentioned, that's broken down by class, so you can see which categories bringing in what. And the traffic fine revenue sharing is pretty much a set number. Again, I talked to the ministry for that for 2016. Page 5. All the fire protection agreements are in there for the contracts. Again, some smaller items there that aren't significantly changed from last year. Page 6. The residential and all the waste management fees are fairly consistent with the prior year, so there's no big changes there. Page 7 on the revenue side of things. Again, no big changes from last year. The ones that could change, and it's more, I always like to be a little more conservative on it because you just don't know what's going to happen. But on the planning side and the building side, you always hope for lots of fees in there because that's a good sign for the community. But it's tough to budget. So we kind of just go on the prior years or an average of the last few years.
Chaz is going to take it to the next level this year.
No pressure.
Page 8, the last part of the revenue there, the tourist contract that's set. We start getting into the expenditure side of things. Again, there's no real big significant change in the council section. Page 9, the RD and other agency, they offset with the revenue or the collection side of things. One change that you'll see from last year is the wages and benefit accounts are combined. And that's in large part with the payroll system that we brought back in-house. So if you were to look at last year's numbers, you would add those two accounts and you'd get close to what's there on the single wage and benefit account. Legal, again, it's a tough one to determine, but kind of going on last year and what might be coming down the pipe on the legal issues. Page 10, the 71.5 you see there is the transfer from the infrastructure levy to go into the reserve. changes on that page from prior years. Page 11. I guess the big item on that page, the two items, the first one being, there's the carryover of the, for the work that's gonna be done in this building. That's included in that contracts account. And then the HR legal, excuse me, there's a couple pending issues there that could end up costing money. Page 12. All the bylaw, or some of the bylaw interest and principal, they're set by the schedule that accompanies the bylaw with MFA, so those are set. I haven't got the audit fees in for this year, so that could change. Some of these items, again, can obviously change in the next couple of months, so some of them, we actually know the actuals before the budget's set, so. Page 13, the big item there was the finance contracts. That's the balance of the asset management that was committed to last year. That's the asset management with Urban Systems. Page 14, no big changes from prior years. Page 15, there is a couple, and I'll talk a bit more about the policing side here, but an additional thing that they're downloading on municipalities is this DNA analysis.
Yeah, don't pay that one. I'm serious.
And anyways, it's what's been, there was a schedule that we were given that municipalities are supposed to absorb this, so
Yeah.
that number's
What's
in
it
there.
for? Well, I mean, DNA analysis, and I figured it out, but really, what's it for? Could it go to Green Timbers?
It's a downloading that's taking place, so it's an additional cost that we didn't have to bear before that they're saying now we have to pick up. But their funding formula for that is ridiculous.
Yeah, it
Cost
looks-
allocation, because we got dinged a higher amount than Chilliwack,
Yeah.
it seems inherently dysfunctional.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
No,
I get their ducks in a row. and they
that
go-
number's just in there because that's what they said that Hope was gonna be allocated, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Understood. yeah.
not a done deal, but it's new from last year anyways. Nothing significant from prior years on 15, on page 16. Nothing stands out that's significantly different from prior year. 17. Turnout gear has been put in the budget. Other than that, nothing else significant there. Nothing significant change-wise on 18. 19. Nothing there. 20. Nothing there. The one item that is gonna just get reallocated when I hopefully get around to is the equipment lease. It's gonna have its own, I've set them up, but I just haven't had a chance to change the budget, but the principal on the sweeper, the interest in principal will have its own account. Because eventually when I get to the financial statements, they have to be shown separately, so I thought, why not do that at the early stage? Vehicle maintenance contracts, we've left 30,000 in there, in consultation with the new mechanic and everything, and there's quite a backlog of work for him to catch up on, so it's just not possible for them to do it all, so there's still a requirement to outsource.
That's, the notice on page 18 there, on the top.
21.
Now, the fire department, fleet maintenance, or is that a suitable amount? Second from top, there's 20,000, is that?
Yeah, that includes all the testing on the fire trucks. I think it's a consistent number from year to year.
The only numbers that we can count on are the testing of the licensing for every year, the provincial inspections. That's what we can count on for cost. Certainly maintenance, if we don't pull a truck out of the garage, we won't do anything to it and need to repair, but, you know, yeah, we try and stay consistent, you know, snowfall budget as it is, right?
Yeah.
Um, 21, nothing really significant difference there. I don't think there's any big changes there. On 22. I think under the drainage ditch, there was 8,000 identified for Stevens Road, Taco Lake Road, to repairs with culverts. Again, as with the ice and snow removal, that's a hit and miss. Nothing's gonna be different on page 24.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
About the snow removal? So, I know in past years, we've talked about the fact that if we haven't used the allocated amount, it would go into another, an account for future years. Are we doing that? Are we doing that?
I don't think there's been a bylaw set up for that.
No, okay.
No, but it's a situation where you can just set up a reserve,
Okay,
you know, it's almost like a contingency or something if you had a bad year.
but that hasn't happened.
I don't believe so, but it's certainly be kind of done.
Because it was a light year last year, I suppose, right? Couple of years.
Yeah.
I think one thing we do have to do as a council too, I mean, this is probably more committee of the whole business than it is budget legal business, but I would like to, before we throw a new budget in place, is look at the snow removal on the sidewalks and walkways in the district. Because the way it is now, I mean, we have a lot of people in our community who are aged, and snow removal here is not a monstrous expense anyways, but to expect folks that are over 65 to go shovel snow on a municipal sidewalk is not a realistic approach. So I think maybe we can have a discussion about that and see what kind of a budgetary impact that would have. Obviously, it's a gamble, you know how much, there'll be a range, but I do think we have to look at that because there's been lots of legitimate complaints about that. Something to look at.
Page 24, we were on, I think. No significant changes there. I guess on the bridge maintenance, the Silver Hope Bridge, some work was budgeted for 2015, it didn't get done, so it's carried forward into 2016. The middle section there, just don't worry about it, it's the amortization, it'll be one of the last things that I get in the budget, but it's an accounting entry that goes in and out. Those are just last year's numbers for the time being. The waste management counts are all consistent with prior years. Page 26, big one there, I guess, would be the continuation, obviously, with the landfill monitoring. That has to be done. again, we'll cover that when we get into capital, although it's not capital, but that's when we'll deal about any transfers from reserves. But there is a reserve for the OCP, so part of that expense can be covered by the purpose for what the reserve is set up for.
Quick question, 26, are the full alloy liners for the grades, 15? So is that, we have some in stock, I assume, and that's an additional purchase, or?
I'm sorry, which item?
Item,
Last one.
right on the very bottom of
Oh.
page 26.
I don't know what, that's, when I sat down with the foreman, that's the number that he put in there, and it's been a kind of a consistent number.
So we must have supplies in stock.
I would think so.
This would be an additional
Yes.
acquisition.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, we've had a lot of friends and neighbors pass on.
No, I would imagine.
It's been more than 15 per year.
29, I did put in the 42,000 there, as part of the OCP.
Which one are you on here?
29.
Okay.
So that is, again, that's through the OCP. Nothing significant on the building inspection there. Page 30, that's the request from Advantage Hope at the top of the page. Outside of parks, that's all pretty consistent from prior years.
The, Dale, the 160, that would be a continuation of the existing contract.
I believe it's, that we received a letter that it's slightly higher than last year.
But it's tying into the current contractual arrangements, just a slight increase.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Page 31, it's all consistent with prior year stuff. I think one item that stands out was there's an increase there for maintenance, inspections, et cetera, at the new sports pool. That was submitted by the foreman. About halfway down page 32 there.
16,000 more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Page 33, all the grants in the aid there. Those were brought to council earlier, and then the three $5,000 ones.
What was the 16,000?
That was for,
That was middle of the page.
for inspections and maintenance of the new sports pool. Page 33, the library, that was the regional library's requisition this year. For council's information, it was 2.86% overall increase, but hopes actually went down 0.1%.
Yeah, given the funding from the.
Yeah. Page 34, the visitor center contract. And any other, well, interest in the principal and the debentures there. And then the last page just shows the totals for each department. So we'll go into the sewer. And if I occasionally reference you'll see little yellow numbers on the right. That's the total number sequence for everything that's in the binder there.
Yeah, I like that.
But we'll try just going by the sewer fund section, page 1.
Just a quick thing here, Dale, if we can, do you want to go through it all, and then I'll give you,
Sure.
give you a couple of questions on the fire department?
Yep.
Okay, we'll go through it all.
Sewer, the buildings, most of the revenues there would have been sent out, so they're pretty accurate numbers, barring small adjustments throughout the year. I think the one item on page 2 that was put on the wish list was under sewermen contracts, and that was to start an inspection program to start inspecting the sewer lines, because some of them are fairly old and there has been some sewer main breaks, so this is to try to anticipate where the worst areas are, I guess. So the foreman requested that. Other than that, nothing's really different on the sewer side of things on page 2. Or page 3. The sewer discussions will be more with the capital side of things. On the water fund side of things, same thing, most of the billings have gone out, so the revenues are pretty accurate. Page 2, I don't think anything was really submitted on that page, and any change from prior years. And again with page 3, don't think there's anything different there on that page either. So that is a little bit more of the detail. What I've then prepared for you is, and you'll see at the start of the summary page, you'll see a legend there. You'll see that I like to use colors a lot. So I find it very helpful in distinguishing things that, as I've got here, that it helps the budget process when you know that certain things you just can't touch because you're bound by contracts or bylaws or what have you. So there's no point, you can't change them, or you're going to be in breach of a contract, or you're going to be in breach of your boring bylaw, for example, or whatever. So if you want to go to this one here, go to the summary. I'm just going to talk about this for a second. So what's new for you to see this year? You'll see the 4 different funds there. The idea behind this is that each of those funds have to be balanced within themselves, meaning that you can't use the general fund to balance your sewer fund. You can't use the sewer fund to balance the water fund. You can't use the police to balance the water, and so on and so forth. So the revenues generated in each of those funds are going to be used to pay the bottom part of that screen there, which are all the expenses. Now, at this early stage of the game, you'll see the FAR 2 funds, the FAR 2 right funds. You just go to the bottom there. You'll see that they're balanced right now. I used a $54,000 reserve transfer just when we had our early discussions with the manager, and that was to help offset that $380 in capital. So again, I'm just showing you here that that's our ultimate goal, obviously, is to get each of these balanced within their own funds. So at this stage of the game, if the police fund were to stay exactly like it is right now, there might be a slight change on one of the expense accounts, but if you go to the top of that page, the police revenue is actually down from last year that we need to generate in taxation, so that's a decrease to the taxpayers. So, and what I intend to do going forward is that at the end of each year, once the audit's done, is that if there's a surplus in the prior year's policing budget, then we use that to make sure that we can lower the taxes. Because what's happened is, in essence, is that you've taxed the taxpayer so much money, but you've actually spent less because the cost by the RCMP were less. Well, they shouldn't have to pay more the next year if you've saved money that year. So The idea being if you saved 100,000, say in 2016, and then in 2017, you would use 100 grand towards the revenue side of things. But that's not to say their costs ain't gonna go up, so we still have to tax more, but at least it's lessening the burden from the savings from the prior year, so. So this is the summary page anyways of this section that I've prepared, and then there's also a revenue summary, and that's just summarizing things in more groupings from the first section that I discussed, so you can just have a look at that on your own. But the next one is if we go to the budget detail, or expenditure detail rather, yeah, and that's on page 66 on the bottom corner there. Well, actually, let's just change that a bit. Let's go to page 56. Start with the revenue. Yeah. Yeah, so the page. So what I've included on this first draft is I put the actual from 2015 at this point in time, and keep in mind the audits, or not the audit, but the year work's underway, so there's going to be some adjustments to some of the accounts, so those aren't cast in stone. Some of them are, but there could be some adjustments, so it's to give you an idea though how it relates to this year's budget and what was budgeted last year. So all this information that I just talked about is now transferred onto this form, and it's a bit more summarized. So it's into the groupings that are going to end up getting transferred onto those summaries. And so you can see how the revenues are comparable to the prior year on page 57, as well as page 58. And then, again, on page 58, when you start seeing the color code, so if you have your legend handy, you would see that pink there it's revenue we've already got determined. So we've either sent the bills out, or it's like I talked about with the small community grant. We know what we're getting, so it's a number I don't want to fiddle with because it's an actual. The parcel taxes, like I said, now that I've seen this come out of color, some of the colors are a little hard to distinguish. But for example, on page 58, the parcel tax is bound by bylaw, so we can't change that. Same with on page 59, and same with the water fund revenues. Those are pretty much all actuals. There is some guesswork in some of the other ones based on prior years. And again, on page 60 with the traffic fine, we know that that's set. So there could be some change on the RCP revenue, but it would be very slight from this point forward. And page 61, again, that's going to be for future meetings to discuss on the reserve transfer side. So then we do get into page 66, and this is where you'll see a little bit more color. All the wage accounts are in a certain color. That's because they're bound by contracts or policy or what have you, so there's not a lot of room that you can move that in most areas. All the insurance accounts there are identified, and those premiums are already paid, and obviously all set amounts that we have to pay. So I'm just going to go through this section, just identifying the ones that we you know, for the legend, because I've already talked about the numbers on the first part of the discussion. On page 67, again, utilities, I've highlighted those because there's not much you can do with them unless you start turning lights out and shutting things down. So, I mean, a lot of it depends on what kind of good facility on the usage, but there's not a lot of wiggle room. So, it's not where we're gonna make drastic changes going forward in the budget with utilities. Page 68, again, there's some wages identified there. 69, wages, insurance. 70, again, utilities and wages. 71, again, insurance, utilities, and then we've got some contractual obligations there. Page 72, again, is benefits, insurance, and utilities. So you see that throughout there just to help you identify where we can't really do too much. Our hands are kind of tied on them.
The one
I mean,
quick
you
thing,
could stop insuring buildings, but that wouldn't be very wise decisions.
the one quick thing, Dale, I think throughout your supplies and materials, anywhere where we purchase supplies and materials from US suppliers, I think we have to make some significant adjustments over what we anticipated last year, because obviously our currency's tanked in the last year, so there's probably gonna be a 20% increase in supply costs just based on currency alone.
I'm not familiar enough with the suppliers yet, but I haven't seen a whole lot of US suppliers.
Well,
No, but most of the things are made in the US.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
from that point of
for
view, yeah.
Public Works, say,
Yeah.
the fancy goodies they buy, a lot of them are made in, so.
I mean, prices at my store going up in relation to the dollar cost,
Yeah.
not drastic.
I really haven't done a kind of an adjustment on that, but, I mean, some of the accounts, you know, say it came in at 18,000 last year, it might be at 20 this year, so there's probably most of the accounts probably have a little bit of coverage for that type of thing due to the low dollar.
It'd be good to do a little mystery shopping, so to speak, and see what the goods are worth now as opposed to what they were last year, because we might have some peculiar surprises here.
So again, basically that's just, you know, for your knowledge to see how things look. And again, when you get a little farther down, just find the page, you'll just see things grouped a lot better to the function that it's relating to. Most particularly, for example, on page 83, or page 18 in that section, you've got all your interest and all your amortization. It's all in one area, so you're not flipping through different pages on the first section to find everything that's related to each other. And then everything follows after that in the sewer fund. And then into the water fund. And then finally, the police fund there. And the police numbers there are given to us. The one that I'm still waiting for on page 88, is we haven't got our final billing yet for that, what they call prison contract. So last year we budgeted 90,000, and I don't even think if we got a really big bill that we're gonna hit 70, so I just played it safe and put 70 in. I don't think it's gonna reach 90 by any stretch, so that's why I'm fairly comfortable that that police fund is really almost balanced. We won't have to spend a lot of time on it. There's only about 6 accounts that relate to it, so, and they're all pretty much, we're told what to pay, so. The other page is in there again, it's just everything on the wish list for capital. We'll talk about that at a future meeting. But the other thing that's a little easier to see this year is that all the principal payments are all in one area, and then all your transfers to reserves are all in one area, so you're not flipping through to find them throughout that first document. So that's kind of a brief summary of what we've done at this point in time. What will eventually happen, the setup that I have, is go to there, yeah, bylaw. This is what's going to be going on the bylaw as the schedule. So all this, when we get back to, if you go back to there, you'll see the column here where the middle column, and it was just labeled for tonight's meeting, February 24 changes. So if we were to make a change tonight, that's going to flow right through to the end schedule that goes on the bylaw, or the bottom line. So you can see right now what that effect's going to have on the bottom line. So I don't have to run back to the office and fiddle with my calculator and then, tell you 3 days later what the change means. So that's kind of what I have to say. So,
Sounds good.
Council's got any questions?
I'll maybe kick it off here just for sport. Page 16 and 17. What I'm quite keen on is making sure that we allocate the appropriate amount of resources to our fire department. During the last year, we identified a number of projects that have to be tucked away in. Mr. DeSorsi, are you being bold enough here, do you think, with regards to like the FITS program, increased recruitment of volunteers, this kind of thing that was identified as a concern of yours, concern of council's? I don't think this is something we can under budget for. I think we have to really think big here. So,
I think if I may, Your Worship, we in the fire admin on page 17, the fire admin materials, supplies, and freight, combined with the fire ops materials, supplies, and freight. I believe last year those were 10,000 each. So what we've done is taken and made them more realistic in terms of what we did this year, and then we broke out categories. So adding the uniforms and stationwear just to break it out, because it was usually lumped into that, and Dale wanted to break that out as a separate line item. So now we've got basically from that 20 last year, it's actually 11 or 19,500, I believe. I think we're short by $500 from what we did last time, based on the actuals more than anything. We added the extra of the turnout gear and the safety clothing, as again anticipating not only new people coming in, but also the fact that our turnout gear is nearing end of life, its life cycle. So it needs to be replaced at some point, and we can't do it all at once. We just can't afford to buy 25 sets of turnout gear. It just is not affordable. So we have to do it in gradually. As we're just approaching the 10-year mark, which is the mark of which we had, and ours is 10 and 9 years old, depending on when we bought it last time. So, and again, we're guessing on the US dollar. I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of these supplies are based on the costs, and the way that I've been used to doing my budget with this council and the councils before is that if it's $15,000, honestly, I get as many sets as I can for that $15,000. I have to try it that way. That's what the budget is. If I can get 6 for that, if I can get 4 for that, that's what I have to do. So it's a guess. It is a guess. If you think we want to throw more in there, certainly recognize and appreciate that suggestion with no problem. But again, it's a ballpark guess. We know we're dealing with those kind of things, and in terms of those dollars, the price can change, as you say, quite substantially overnight.
So council and yourself, and Mr. Spencer had some discussions about establishment of that FITS program. Where within this budget, would that be under firefighter training? Or
It would be under a combination of things. Right now, the FIT program is secondary and thirdary to our problems right now, if you will. Our concerns, our number one concerns are bringing in new people, firefighters. Honestly, we've got fit program members, the fire incident technicians, and a lot of our older people that are currently doing those roles right now at fire scenes. We don't have the first in people, you know, the older folks going into the buildings, going into the fires. They're the people doing the scribing, they're the people doing what the fit person would do. The fit needs a lot more thought in terms of how do we page these people out? Do we have 5 pagers? How do we get them involved? What calls do they go on? Those kind of things. So I think our priority number 1 is to bolster the numbers by 4 or 5 recruits this year, based on that 5 turnout gear. And if we have more, we have more, and let's get them underway and then start building the process. I mean, honestly, if we can get 4 or 5 new people a year, we replace our fire department in 5 years.
But I think just rewinding a little bit to our discussions we had a few months ago, that it was clearly identified by council administration that the FITS program would be a good way to backfill. There's a lot of people in the community that would like to assist the fire department, but don't necessarily have the interest, the expertise, or the time available to become a fully trained fire department member. So I personally, for any fire scene, I don't ever want to see a fire person doing anything a FITS member could do. Because, you know, you have the most experienced people doing essentially entry-level work. That's not a demeaning term, but that's, you know, if someone's doing traffic control, that's a fully trained firefighter. That's not a best use of resources. So I think we identified the FITS program as a priority for this coming year. I think that has to be in there and it has to happen. Because, you know, I don't want to deal with this again next year.
Absolutely.
So if we can, I think maybe for the next budget item, budget meeting rather, we need a FITS program line item in there.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
gotta make it happen this year.
Yeah, absolutely. If,
Gotta go.
and again, I just want to make sure council's aware, your worship, that, again, it is a little bit more complicated than just inviting people in to take part. That we have to make sure, because of the new training regime, that we have the people that are coming in trained, and that takes a lot of our time. And again, bringing in a fit person, the fire incident technician type, is to make sure the logistics are in place. And so that's why it's been a low priority. So I certainly appreciate those comments. And honestly, I don't know what a line item would be, the number would be to cost that out in terms of what they need for equipment, et cetera. I think that we could safely put that into the current training budget and add to that and include that as a priority item. Again, that's certainly up to you guys, so I won't bring that
Yeah.
forward.
But I think there's an expectation in the community that we're gonna deal with this too soon.
So I guess you'd also need, if you had those types of people recruited, you'd have to increase your paid on-call firefighter values, right?
That's again, part of the discussion. Do we pay them as paid on-call firefighters? Do they get the same pay as a member? Again, that's the kind of logistics we have to work out in terms of, again, there's a lot associated with creating a new program, a lot more than I think we realized when we looked into it. And again, how do we call them out? Do we give them pagers? That's $500 a person. So if it's 5 new firefighters plus 5 new fit people, then that's basically 10 pagers. And so again, there will be a cost involved in, or how do we get them on? I think we got to take a look at that. So it's part of the consideration. It's not an excuse, but it's part of the.
I think there's an interest in the community for people to join that program, so we just have to set it up in a proper way.
So
Yes.
can I just ask,
Yeah.
do other communities utilize the FIT program?
One community does, and that's where I got it from, Salt
Okay.
Spring Island, and they're using that currently. And again, it's nice now that they've gone a year into it to be able to tap into their.
Yeah, so I
Pitfalls,
mean,
if
I
you will.
suppose they would be the resource, don't reinvent the wheel, what's the cost?
Precisely,
right?
they've written about it,
Yeah.
they've educated, they trained
Yeah.
on it through magazines. And again, it's nice to go back on them and see, we've seen it, Thomas and I have seen it, you know, in the articles, to try and see, has it worked? I mean, I'm, you know, hopefully they continue to use it and it hasn't been a problem. If there's any problems with it, they found it before we do, that kind of thing.
Because I think what I'm hearing, if I can just give it back to you, is that we've got senior members like Cliff, and we've got those
Exactly.
people
Yes.
who aren't going into a raging building, right? So that they would be an ideal person for this. So really, I mean, it kind of like, what is the chicken or the egg scenario in this? Because you've already got trained firefighters who would fit program, who would fit the fit program. But then the emphasis maybe needs to be on recruitment of actual volunteers. So it's kind of like we have some people who are already been long-term members who now are no longer really capable of running into a burning building, but let's move them into the FIT program.
They still
And
serve
that's- So I think maybe the recruitment piece has to be as equally as important as the FIT program.
And honestly,
Like that's-
if I may, Your Worship, that's a good point. Through the recruitment process, which is coming up next month in our newspaper ad, is to accept applications for an intake, that application will serve for both purposes. And if a person that comes up and is not fit to be an active firefighter through the application process, then that would be the way to offer that opportunity to be involved with us. So yes.
I don't see it as an either or, I see it as an and, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a plus, it's an addition. I want to make sure, as you say, recruitment of active people paged out going to calls is important. I'm worried, or initially, that's the question I had for the guys in Sullivan, worried that you put too much emphasis on people that don't want to be involved all the way, but just want to help out, that we lose people and we don't have enough people. And we have, again, we have to have protocols, and it just has to be done logistically and administratively as to how we handle this. What do they get paid? If they get paid, are they just coming out to certain events? Again, I need to find that out from Sullivan. So, I mean, certainly I'm willing, if the council wants me to maintain and use the budget I currently have, or if you want to throw another 5,000, say, in a line item particularly for the FIT program, try and work within
I
that.
think the question is, do you need more money to make that happen?
I don't know. I don't know what we
You don't need it.
We don't, exactly, no, exactly. So we need to investigate whether or not we need, how we're gonna get them called out, how they're gonna be involved. So
Yeah.
that's the thing.
But we can't tell you,
Of course not, no.
here's some money,
Yeah.
make sure they get paid. You can tell
Absolutely.
us that they're gonna get paid and I need this much money, right? So
Exactly.
maybe, at the very least, the $500 that you have for fire prevention, public education, and
Mhm.
recruiting, advertising, maybe that needs to go up, because $500 does not get you, it gets you a couple ads in Oak Standard. So if you're trying to recruit some people,
Exactly.
there's other things you can do with more money. So I would suggest that you try to increase that, but
Okay.
it's gonna take money to advertise, to recruit.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say for the next budget meeting, I would say think big on this topic.
Okay.
Because, you know, if it costs us an extra 5 or 6
Well,
grand to do it
let's-
properly,
If you don't mind, I won't be
problem.
at the next budget meeting, so let's put it in, can we include it now then, Dale? If we are able to include it into,
I mean, if you want a line item, what we'll do tonight, just because it
Mhm.
took me a little bit to try to
Absolutely,
do
yeah.
that thing through
I
across
don't
the
think you need a
board,
line
but
item, but you can increase
we
that.
can increase the budget, increase the thing and put a comment.
comment, say, set up new account for this amount.
Yeah.
Or set a new account, or that,
Yeah.
because we've earmarked certain things, like for example, fire ops, it breaks out the 2,500 and the 500, what's for. So if we put a line item, or not
Okay.
line, but into, as,
I can do that right now,
Yeah.
so.
and, you know, I'm
put
sure.
5,000 down and see where it flushes out.
What's it
And I'm
called?
trying to, you know, I think council's trying to empower you to take it to the next level here, so if you need the resources, we gotta provide them.
Certainly, appreciate that.
And the other thing, I think we're, because you're a man of many talents, I think we're, and obviously I'm not gonna point fingers, but I think, you know, obviously your expertise, your main expertise is fire department, and I think we have to, as a council administration, be very careful not to spread you too thin, and, you know, keep you focused on the big fish here, so.
Well, it is fire and emergency management, that's our
Yeah.
focus, or try to be the focus, so yeah, appreciate that.
Appreciate that discussion.
Thank you.
So what was the amount, sorry?
5,000. 5,000 extra.
Oh, yeah, that's gonna add quite a bit.
Did- oh, okay, sorry. I see what you did, okay, sorry.
So with the question on the turnout here, now the 5 sets, that's adequate to systematically replace the turnout here that you need to.
We have 25, 28 sets now, with our numbers? 28 sets a year.
How many sets are expiring?
There's a few
Some
that
that
have
are
expired already,
more.
they're starting, we bought some in 2006, we bought some in 2007, and we probably had a couple sets before that. The FIT program I would not expect them right now to turn out to be a coverall situation. The 5 sets is, yeah, and we effectively have to replace 25 to 30 sets of gear in the next, and we're trying to spread it out as equally as we can for as long as we can. 10 years is the industry standard, so going a few years over is certainly not unheard of.
So I guess the question would be, if we buy the 5 sets, does this guarantee that all fire personnel, if they follow all proper protocol, they have their gear on, they do what they're supposed to, they're safe as far as,
Absolutely.
there's no equipment out there that's unsafe to use?
Not at all,
Okay.
not at all, no. This is maintenance of equipment based on the standards that we operate under.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Just for everybody's, on page 91, right here, I think it's the last page, very last page. And again, it's prelim, these are just numbers from last year, but it appears that every year they're putting $3,000 into the fire equipment reserve. And to me, that just sounds like one set of turnout here. So it sounds like there is money, I mean, there is a fire equipment reserve. I would assume for that type of purpose, if you got caught off guard and you had to buy a whole bunch at one time, that's what that reserve's for. But we are contributing to it, so although say we're spending 15, we're putting 3,000 in as well, so just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
It's- The reserve isn't being ignored as far as being replenished.
Yeah. And then on the RCMP topic, and then I'll be quiet for a while, I'm sure everyone else is. I think we have to get to a point where we tell the RCMP, this is our policing budget, make it happen for that budget. Because they have a habit of just sending bills, and it's a very dynamic environment. And I think it's like any other, like as Mr. DeSorsi said, you give me X dollars, I have to make it work for that. I think the RCMP has to operate under the same mindset, because I know over the years, they just send bills, well, this is 10,000 more than we thought, this, that, and the other thing. And it's not due to differing activity levels, it's just because of poor budgetary practices at headquarters. So I thought as we have a contract with them, we have an agreed upon amount, and they make it happen. And if they have to make cuts to meet the budget, so be it. If they have a surplus, that's great too.
They've historically been under budget, I'd say.
I think this year, I think you'll find them too. I'm pretty sure all the budgets, or all the bills are in, and I think there's a couple $100,000
Yeah.
under.
And they do that through finding efficiencies, buying fuel from Emil Anderson or whatever they have to do to find the way. But so when they submit the numbers that they are asking for, where does that come from? Do they need to be more realistic in their numbers that they submit to us?
I'll be honest with you,
Contract.
in my previous place, they didn't have to deal with this because they were under 5,000.
Right.
So this is my first experience with holy moly numbers.
I guess examples like that $10,000 for DNA,
Yeah.
that's something that's new, that they've just thrown at us,
Yeah.
and here you go, here's the bill, make it happen, but, I think they do a pretty good job of, well, in the past history, they've done a pretty good job of trying to find efficiencies to stay within or under that budget, but the problem I have is
Too high of a budget.
the tax requisition request that we have to put out there is unrealistic because their budget perhaps is unrealistic. I don't know who's responsible to ask them that question.
But that's, like I said earlier, that's why, I'm all for if say for example, it was 2 million last year and it comes in at 1.8.
Yeah.
And there ends up a surplus in the RCMP at the end of the day, then the taxpayer shouldn't get taxed again. They should reap the benefit of that shortfall to lessen the burden for them the next year.
Absolutely.
Right.
Because ultimately, ultimately, it's the RCMP's budget, if we over budget.
Right.
So
That's right.
if we over collect one year, then we should under collect the next year.
I guess I'm saying that
To level it off for the taxpayers.
we need to figure out who to talk to make, you know, we do this exercise all the time, trying to come up with a realistic budget. That's why we look at actuals and change our budget figures
Yeah.
to follow in line. I don't know if they do that exactly the same way or not, but how do we, I guess I'll put it on the mayor to find that out.
Well, I think it's.
You're involved in RCMP forums and things like that.
Yeah, it's like questioning motherhood and apple pie. It's kind of an awkward topic to question policing costs for some people, but, you know, not to give a big historical lesson here over the last year, but the first Lower Mainland policing meeting I went to, I asked a reasonably friendly question. I said, when is the last time this division has received an impartial third-party audit? Well, we do in-house audits. You know, they essentially police themselves, which is kind of a interesting concept. But, yeah, I think there has to be a little more accountability. I'm not casting aspersions on finance people in the RCMP, but, you know, if their estimates are consistently higher, let's base our next year's policing on actuals this year. And then,
Because, I mean, they have to know that obviously whatever they submit for budget, municipalities have to go to the taxpayer to get it. So,
What are we paying for, 13 members? 13
Something like
members,
that,
yeah, at
Well,
about
that's-
150,000 a pop.
70% of the
Yeah.
13 member.
yeah, it's expensive
Plus-
business.
That's just as far
That's
as
just,
members.
yeah,
There's
members only.
all sorts of other costs that we're responsible for,
Yeah,
accommodation
building,
and
yeah.
maintenance and fuel and carpet and new roofs and.
I mean, that's a complicated discussion, but I think it's something we have to keep in our minds. Councilor Smith?
Just on, I guess, on maintenance of vehicles and stuff like that, same with maybe on the fire department and things now too. Is there, I know Kevin's not here tonight either too, but just maybe a question for thought, if maintenance seems to be getting caught up over there, taking on some of the fire department stuff, maybe bringing those costs down because of the contract outward to might bring some things into it too, or some of that, I don't know if he's already got too much going on for him over there, or if it's not enough, or if he's looking for work, we also have equipment that he could be working on too, maybe too, to bring some of this cost down. I don't know.
There's certain things I think we have to.
Yeah, no, for sure, absolutely, you have to outsource a lot of it, so, most of it, but.
in my
We did
discussion
inspection.
with Jeff, he's still assessing the fleets,
Yeah,
right? to
yeah,
know
he's
what-
fairly new at it still,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
So I know he's up to his eyeballs in
Yeah.
this, so. You know, this next year, it's gonna be a different year in the sense for that, and hopefully, like, we'll be leveling off so that we get a more kind
Actually,
of actual
yeah,
type
for sure. Yeah, he's fairly.
feel for what our, you know, the mechanics gonna be doing, so.
Yeah, it's a good point, yeah. You know, I think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as the old adage goes, and we do have a lot of equipment that is older but still very functional, so I think the more effort we throw into maintaining it properly, the better off we'll be. I promise not to bring up the snowplow example. Exactly, there's a reason for that.
I have one there.
Okay,
It's a
Councilor
really
Miller?
simple one, on page 8. There's just some conference registration costs there. There's the LGLA conference, which I think just happened. Did anybody go, or do we just take that right out of the budget? Or is the idea that that would be for 2017 prepaying?
Which conference?
The LGLA, that was,
Local government.
Oh, leadership, yeah,
that's $5,600, so I'm pretty sure that was the beginning of February.
that's usually a February thing.
Yeah, it's
Probably
done.
just happened, so I can haul that out.
There's your $5,000 there.
Would that be next year, though?
No,
Look how fast it is.
It's my door.
Like that, go.
One of the conferences we kind of,
There used to be a line item here for FCM. Now, if any council member wants to go, we can certainly include that, but that always seems to be on the, and that's not mentioned here, but that's on the grad weekend. So I think the only reason for a mayor to not be at the grad weekend is death or dismemberment. So unless a council member wants to go, we can leave that out of there as it hasn't been included anyway. So if a member of council wants to go, I'm certain we could throw that in there too. I don't think I'll be able.
Winnipeg. I don't know about how we do it. It's a mosquito peg.
Any additional comments from our initial kick at the can here?
No, but, Corey, may I have a comment.
Yes.
I know that Bob and I were at the Fraser Health recruitment, and we talked briefly about, Fraser Health had asked us whether we would
Yeah.
consider a scholarship for recruiting, for helping to support someone to take the 6-month course at UFV for home support, which is about $4,500. And I know that they have a big push in trying to get a group of people from here locally to go and be a cohort to carpool and having all those savings. And I think I know both of you and I have had some discussions around that. And I think that $4,500 or a $5,000 investment in our community to have somebody go and be trained and stay local to be home support at the lodge, because they can't even find people to come to Hope who want to do that. So it's like they would leave 6 months after taking that course and be employed and be working and living in the community. So I think that that would show that we are investing in our community to keep people here locally employed with, $20 an hour job to stay. And, I would be in favor of, seeing what Work BC could possibly do to help support that person as well around that. And then, of course, a contingent in the fact that they have to stay and work local for a period of time. And if they move off or go to Chilliwack, well, then there has to be some sort of repayment plan. But I guess for me, I see it as a effort to say that we're committed to retaining and recruiting local people to stay locally in our community, to work locally.
Can certainly include that.
So would that be a scholarship at the UFB level or at the high school level?
I mean, it could be either or. I mean, I guess when I think about it, Heather, I think about it as someone who's maybe more established.
So UFB level?
Yeah.
That's good too.
Yeah, not someone who's coming out of high school, because I think the high school students have those opportunities for scholarships. Whereas someone who's maybe 30 years old, maybe what's holding them back is the financial hardship, right?
Well, could we put a line item in there as far as have a little professional recruitment fund and not target it to a specific?
Well, what I was gonna suggest is, maybe I should have learned that early on.
Because in years past, for instance, this is not to get back into big historical thing here, but when I was mayor last time, the council agreed to fund the vehicle lease payment of a doctor coming in, because we had was sort of a little friendly incentive to say, hey, we're keen on having a new doctor here and we want to help you folks out. And so that's what we did. So we can maybe, if we put say a $5,000 pot of cash available for the professional recruitment category, and then we can target it to where it needs to go on a yearly basis.
The only thing you gotta be careful about on that is per the charter, a council or a municipality can't assist a local business. And a doctor is a local business. So how they would view that from just a recruitment point of view, because you're not paying it personally to that person, you might be okay. But the moment that you start actually doing anything to get them set up, anything, to be set up into his own doctor's office, and it's a toughie, because for smaller communities, you want to get good doctors, but it does fall into the category of assisting a business.
But a scholarship would not.
Scholarship would.
Yeah, so I think, however you wanna word it so that we're not in violation of the charter, right?
Well, what I was gonna suggest here, and I cannot tell a lie here, because when I was setting this up, what page are we, okay, page 9. No. Where is that? There we go. This number here was set at 10,000 last year, and so nothing was spent, so I said, well, let's cut it in half.
Yeah.
So if there's still stuff, you know, I mean, if there's stuff that comes up throughout the year for council, then that's what the 5's there for. But if you know, if council feels strongly about this item,
I'll
then,
explain that one if I could.
and then I just bump that back up to 10, and it covers that.
The reason we had the 10 in there was sort of new last year. We have the grant and aid policy, but it's got set time for people have to apply by a certain date, and then the money is dispersed by a certain date. We thought there'd be
Like a
some
slush
sort of an
fund.
option that if requests came to us that didn't fit that particular policy, that we had an option to fund them.
Right.
And it didn't happen this year,
Right.
but I'm glad to see that there's still something. That's
Yeah.
how it was reduced, but I'm okay
But
with
also
that.
in conjunction with the grant and aid,
And we didn't spend all that. Well, the policy on reduced.
here on the detail here, where are we, page?
3,900 unallocated, is that what you're looking at, Dan?
Yeah,
Unasked.
yeah, page 33 lists all the grants and aids that council approved, was it back in January? And the policy, the grant and aid policy stipulates 10,000 in each of, I think, next few years' budget. So what I've got there on that detail there is 3,900 unallocated. So that's, and it's not uncommon to have a quote slush fund for people that, I didn't know the deadline was there, and it's something that's important to council, then that's what that would be for. So if that's what sort of the council contingency was for, and you've already got that 3,900, well then maybe you use that council contingency for what you just talked about, and then we don't have to adjust it. So it's something for council to think about.
I wrote it, there's another topic here, sewer, I wrote it as sewer. Made me think about it, I had one of the town staff ask if there was any money in the budget for getting them that Twin Ricks thing to have AFB. Anybody that has to do with work in the sewer and water. I don't know who would talk to about that, there's no director of operations here, but throw it out there. I don't think it's a very expensive.
She has an answer.
Okay.
It's something we're looking at through the Health and Safety Committee,
Okay.
and there's a request already before the CEO, so with that, we can budget for that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a few $100 or something. More than that?
Is it
500
really?
bucks.
500 bucks?
Isn't it
No.
500
Oh,
would be
Troy
good?
didn't say that.
What's it called?
Oh, it's 3.
Twin Ricks.
The Twin Rex.
The heavy shop.
Yeah, you
Oh.
can change over, but I think it's dropped.
Oh, it's because when I took
Couple
it,
hundred.
it was about 300 when I
Yeah,
was on that, yeah, so,
Oh,
okay.
okay, well,
But the
It's
cost
not
of,
covered by
we
the.
would just, a lot of check.
Absolutely, totally, yeah.
Yeah.
It's good for a long period of
It's,
time.
yeah, it's been a long time, yes.
Long time.
Yeah,
yeah,
I had it done 10 years ago.
I know, I don't want it. Or it's worth-
Yeah, so we'll look at it through our health and safety budget.
Yeah, thanks. That's a budget we fit in, okay.
So are we gonna increase the council contingency to 10?
If that is council's wish.
You got it.
It's 5.
Wait a second.
39 and rent to me.
So yeah, leave the 39
Breezy.
and 8 for,
Yeah.
for
Make it work.
anything extra.
Or we could bump it up a couple grand
You mean the grant and aid?
no, the
Oh,
contingency. So if you were thinking that whole contingency, you mentioned the figure 4,500, that pretty much eats that up. So if council felt that they want to have something there for unknown things, then you could plug, I could plug another couple grand in there and bump it up to 7 or 8 or whatever you guys want.
I'd like to see, I mean, I know that the fellow from Fraser Health was gonna get, the policy that, that they use for those types of, scenarios around, payback and, you know, that type of thing, so we can look at that, so that we create a policy around that, a bylaw.
Is this something that you think would happen this current year?
Yeah, I mean, I was just at a Healthy Communities meeting on Tuesday, and they're seriously talking about having, for a September cohort.
Okay.
So we need to advertise and sort of publicize
Yeah,
that.
I'm okay for that. I think we should
Yeah.
increase that by at least a few couple thousand, just to give us the ability to act on it.
Split the difference and go.
Sure.
Well, and I think too, a neat opportunity is that $500,000 announcement that Fraser Health
Yes.
recently announced, and they're going to have as a community some say in where that goes, so I have no problem showing leadership by.
And that is
by-
ongoing funding, I confirm that.
Hmm?
It's ongoing funding, that
Yeah.
500,000, it's
Okay.
not, one time.
That's good, because the initial scuttlebutt was it was a one-time
No.
try it out.
Catherine Lee had indicated that it's on.
Good, okay, that's pretty reliable source.
The 500,000. Fraser Health wrote a press release last week that there's $500,000 coming to the community to improve health quality. And so the community needs to decide, I guess, the stakeholders, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And there'll be various forums.
Watch the fighting begin.
Yeah.
$1 on the table.
I'll arm wrestle somebody for the
Yeah.
Use the 500,000 to fix everybody's injuries.
Yeah, yeah, that's me about it. Okay, additional comments?
I've just got a couple wrap-up things, and it's not really dealing with this, but going forward, my plan is in conjunction with the new ops manager. And what I've noticed is that, and the mechanic totally agree with me, is that there's not much detail in the accounts for example, tracking vehicle maintenance per vehicle. And it's not giving us, I mean, without spending hours diving into the accounts to find out what that bill was for and what this bill's for, to find out what unit 101 cost you. We'll sit down and get some kind of account structure so that whether we do it by, say, parks department vehicles, but just fleet maintenance, you don't have a clue what vehicles cost you.
Is there a fleet maintenance management program software that we?
It's something we could look into, but, I mean, you
I know
know,
several that are.
for example, like in Harrison where it was, I set up vehicle accounts for every vehicle they had, so, but they only had like 10 vehicles.
Right.
That would be a little onerous here, but there's gotta be something that gives us better information. You know, whether, you know, you can track a vehicle and say, well, this thing's costing us way too much money, we gotta shelve it, right? Right now, you don't have that, other than say a visual, somebody saying, yeah, look at that thing's going.
Maybe that's something we could suggest, maybe if Jeff would look into, is that there are some excellent programs out there that are simple, easy to use, you plunk in your information,
Yeah.
you can.
So whether it's a sub-program of
Yeah.
our accounting software, but it just, there's a few accounts that I'd like to get more detail for you, and for myself as well. It's, I don't like overkill, but I also like, you know, better information, like wages too, like, there's just parks admin wages. Well, I'm used to saying, having a wage account for when the guys go spend time at Memorial Park or 6th Avenue Park, so you know where they're spending their time, and it's just a simple case of them changing their time card. But right now, it's just parks admin, so you don't know where everything's getting spent. And so those type of things, but there's no time for it this year. There's no way in the world I'd be able to get that done. But moving forward, I'm gonna be kind of making those type of recommendations in conjunction with talking to everybody and see what they want.
That's great.
So for the next meeting, as, I'm sorry, I missed that last meeting. We kind of set aside Wednesdays moving forward, just so that we haven't set a next date. Probably what we'll do, we'll focus on the capital for what's presented. In the meantime, management will be able to get together and whittle it down somewhat. Because right now, 2 million, kind of hard to balance the budget. But again, we said to everybody, put a wish list in, and then we have to start prioritizing things and saying, you know, let's do this the next year or two. So we're gonna do that, so I'm kind of thinking maybe March 9th, if that fits, then we can at least get properly
So not
advertised.
the second?
No. And then if we have to after that, we may have to, you know, it really depends how each meeting goes. You saw the schedule, how we work backwards. You know, we've got set statutory deadlines that we have to have met. And then of course we have to have the public process meeting as well. So I think that was scheduled for the 20th of April. So we have to just, between now and then, we've got to get the right product to that meeting that's going to go forward for the bylaw. So if the 9th works, maybe think about your schedules. You can email us, and if everybody's cool for the 9th, we'll set it up for
I
that.
can't make the night, I have a ladies auxiliary that night.
Oh, you're a model, okay, well, there we go.
Now the
Man
other,
of many, a woman of many talents.
now the other thing too
No one
is,
asked me, but.
is I just kind of picked Wednesday as a midweek day. We don't want to do budget meetings on Monday. Friday's not a good night for meetings. So if the Wednesday on the week of the 9th doesn't work, if the Thursday's better.
Well, maybe all of you guys should come to the fashion show.
We'll be
With the
there,
ladies auxiliary.
we'll be there. We'll be there.
But moving forward, it'd be nice to make sure that we get all of council present, because it's only fair, but this is the first one, but going forward, it's nice to have, just so they don't miss out, and so we don't do a lot of repeating for the best use of time.
So maybe what I might suggest is we can get Wendy to send an email out tomorrow to whole council for your best date available the week of March the 7th.
Yeah.
And then we can get that set and posted on our Facebook, our website, and front bulletin board.
That could be your out there, Jerry.
What?
Got a budget meeting and can't do it.
For the ladies, for the auxiliary?
Oh my goodness, yeah, how do you say no to them? Under capital projects, there's a couple of ones there that I guess we could add some as a council here. There was some discussion a while ago about Turner Street exit from the station house, because we can make the use of that facility a lot easier.
Why don't you, on those type of things, maybe email John?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
And then we can apply a cost to it with, you know, discussions with the appropriate foreman or whoever.
Yeah.
And then I can plug those in before the next meeting.
Yeah, and I think another thing is that a proper pedestrian walk to Silver Creek area, we have to find a solution there. That's probably something that would involve a grant, but I know a lot of people in Silver Creek feel that they've been overlooked, and like we have to deal with that eventually. So. Anyways, I guess that's a wrap.
Mm-hmm.
We're done for the evening. Thank you all, sir.